But tonight, Simon, on the Architects, we're going to be
talking to a musician.
We're talking to a musician and also probably more significantly known as an architect in Roger Nelson from NH Architecture, who we've mentioned on the show. We've had Hamish Lyon on the show previously. I can't remember when. It would have been a few years ago now. Partly that's why I can't remember.
Yeah, well, probably was about a year and a half ago or something.
And NH Architecture, a big, practice that's come out of retail work and done some very significant retail work, including at the moment, and obviously prompting our current discussion in relation to Myer, the new Myer opening up in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, which is pumping away for Christmas now.
Yes,
and looking fantastic.
As I discovered on Saturday, in what might be called one of those retail moments where you go, I should have started home. And then, of course, also NH Architecture more. In terms of more public work, the convention centre, the extension to Jeff's shed down at South Bank, we've mentioned a bit on the show as well.
Recently won a national award.
Didn't pick up the big one in the national though.
No, it didn't pick up the named award, but it got an award.
Yes, indeed. So Roger Nelson from NH Architecture coming on soon. You can check out their wares at narchitecture.net, not com.
Very easily navigable site, actually, too.
Yeah, it is a nice little site. And also did Costco at Docklands, which might come up as well.
Yeah,
as well as heaps of other
That's
stuff.
a good one. Yeah, I really like that Costco shit.
Now, just before that, we heard singing on vocals there, Roger Nelson, and in front of us is Roger Nelson from NH Architecture. Roger, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Welcome. Yeah, it's good to be here.
And we've been very...
Thanks for kicking us off with a bit of tracks by... What's your band called?
We're called the King Tones.
And that was Caledonia.
Caledonia.
Yeah.
Louis Jordan's song.
It's great. And you guys play every Sunday at the Elwood RSL?
Elwood RSL, yes, been going 13 years. In fact, this Sunday is our 13th anniversary. Small gathering.
Get on down there.
Yeah.
And we will be playing...
So what time does it kick off at, like 6 o'clock on
5:30. 5:30 through till 8:30 or 9.
I imagine that would be... I've never been to the Elwood RSL.
It's
I imagine
it's a good place,
isn't it?
Pardon?
It's a little modernist number down on that main street.
Yeah, a little sort of grey concrete block thing. It's a little lawn in the front there they use for Anzac Day, and
I imagine it'd be a good place for a quiet beer on a Sunday evening.
It is. It's great, and they also have a bistro which they've managed to connect with the music as well. So that sort of combination of 4 foot wide chicken parmigianas and they look enormous.
Do they have cheap beers?
Oh yeah, cheap beers, all right. Yeah.
And I'm going to continue to not talk about architecture for another second because just as we were saying, as we always do with our guests, try and keep close to the mic while we're speaking, just reminding us that Roger, of course, is a collector of microphones, Roger, and you've even been on the ABC TV show.
I have, yes, and I survived, and I'm here to tell the story. But, I've had this obsession for quite some time, and I finally got into it about 5 years ago, and now I've got a couple hundred microphones.
Can you just identify the
This
microphone?
Is a Sennheiser 421, or was it 441? I can't remember now. MD, and it's an MD something or other.
Really? We've never had a guest do that before.
We certainly haven't.
And we've got 4 of them here in the studio.
We
are they a good mic?
They are. They're excellent. They're a workhorse. They're a workhorse.
Well, that's what we need at Triple R. It's like get a good working.
You can get this really close to a drum and not destroy it.
As much as we'd like to talk about microphones, and of course that is an extension of your harmonica playing.
Exactly.
And a lot of those mics, we saw them before, they're fantastic. Fantastic looking little things. But we want to talk about architecture.
Of course.
And you're, of course, one of the principals of NH Architecture. Mm-hmm. And it's a sort of it's a bit of a different beast, NH Architecture. It's a firm that's not easily sort of classifiable because it does a few different things, but it's really born out of the retail sort of public realm work.
And the old B&N retail group.
That's right. Way back then, that started in '94, and in 2004 we changed our name to NH Architecture. And the H, of course, is my partner, Lyndon Haywood, and I'm also joined by Hamish Lyon and Peter Dredge as principals of the company. So, it's a relatively young company, obviously, and but it's always been pitched at large scale and complex urban development problems and sites and so on, and that's meant that we've worked all across Australia and New Zealand as well. Yeah, so
there's a parts of the work that is sort of master planning and really sort of dealing with the space between buildings, but also really importantly, and we had Hamish Lyon on the show talking about this is really the sort of role of the building as a civic building and within public space.
Yes. Yeah, that is obviously one of the. We have this sort of term in our practice called working architecture, and that's something that we're really interested in. Is the idea of actually delivering the things that we talk about and develop ideas for, and as a result, and I suppose retail architecture, I've always found anyway, because I've always been interested in it, and urban design as well, is that you're dealing with the way in which people actually live their lives and how they interact with the built environment. So
we're talking about buildings that are used every day.
Yeah, and they're democratic. So I mean, you can't make someone use that sort of building, and they have to want to use it, and they have to want to interact with it. And if they don't like it for one reason or another, they won't go there anymore.
And you finished, your firm recently finished the last couple of years one of the biggest public buildings, civic buildings in Melbourne for quite a while. And joined on to Jeff Shedd, so it completes that whole sort of link as the Melbourne Convention Centre.
Yeah, it's been a fantastic project, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's just won a national award last week, was it?
And of course won the medal in the Victorian Awards early in the year, and we hosted the Victorian Awards the year before that.
Yes. That's right. Yes, it did. Yeah,
yes.
That was I forgot about that. Yeah.
So how does that? What's the difference between, we were talking about that, the sort of role of the kind of everyday? I mean, how does that sort of project work in that sort of sense? I mean, what is it that makes that? You know, what's the way you've approached that as a civic building? And its
well, I suppose, and the first thing I should say is, of course, that was a joint venture with Woods Bagot, where Plenary Group is our client. There was a sort of a conscious effort to find a way in which to incorporate the convention centre as a sort of central piece of what Melbourne has to offer to the world as a venue for all the things that convention centres do, but also to have it reside on the river is obviously pretty dramatic, and to be an integrated part of the city. I mean, most of those buildings that one can point to overseas, and certainly that was studied, you know, they don't exist in that situation. They're generally new territory. And in this instance, the credit to Melbourne, really, that it could actually find a place to develop it and build on existing infrastructure.
Yeah, because it's a tough site. I mean, you are cramped between the river and a really distinguished and quite prominent DCM building, which was Jeff Shedd.
Yeah, yeah.
So I really had to kind of negotiate all that sort of tricky space.
Well, that's right. And of course, in this instance, it was to find its own character and derive that really from its context, I suppose, but also to celebrate the virtues of what preceded it as well. Which is, you know, sometimes that isn't always the case. I mean, sometimes at an architectural level, we often compete with each other quite dramatically and aggressively. But in this instance, it was building on the success of what had been previously installed.
And we will see, it's already, I was just walking down there the other day actually, on Thursday, it's just the extension of sort of South Bank now, continues right down there and start to reinvigorate South Wharf, which is the next sort of a little mini development along the Yarra, which looks like it looks like it'll be fantastic.
Yeah, and I suppose a lot of those things, they will take time, and you're changing the dynamics of the city, but a little, for anyone who's a sceptic about Docklands and that sort of area of Melbourne, you just want to go down there at about 8:30 in the morning, and the traffic is remarkable, foot traffic, you know, through the intersections and so on. There's a lot of people down there doing stuff.
I wanted to ask a bit about, obviously, with the convention centre and the kind of the largest public building the last few years, and then obviously NH doing some very big retail projects. We'll get on to Myer in a minute, but QV, of course, is one of the other very notable ones that you master planned and did a fair bit of it, even though there were other people involved. Does a public project need to look different to a retail project, you know, in the way it presents itself?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I suppose in the end of the day, we have this sort of discussion. I know we'll talk about it later, but the whole idea of exchange, it seems to us that public architecture is, and we call retail public architecture because it's fundamentally interacting with the public, and as we said earlier, it's a choice. You know, people have a choice as to whether they go there. So it is essentially relating to the public in a very public way. So the appearance of things, I suppose, is to try to really resolve everything in a contextual basis rather than that, you know, retail buildings should look tutti-frutti and sort of whizzy-bangy and all that sort of stuff and have stuff hanging off them in all directions, and civic buildings should be stoic and principled and restrained and conservative. It's not really about that at all. The idea of exchange, of course, is that you're really interacting, whether it's a monetary exchange or a knowledge exchange or a discussion. So the state library, in many ways, could operate as a public, you know,
and we've also reached
retail building.
Perhaps a point in society where there's a lesser distinction between all those sorts of things, and they all start to sort of become melded into one, don't they?
Yeah, we're not so formal about the way we interact with that. We interact how we choose, you know.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously with, say, a building like QV, with a building like GPO, which was a public building, very traditional public building, that's now a a retail building, obviously there's an exchange occurring there.
Yeah.
So really the sort of aim is these are buildings both of public exchange, and so they can both fulfil a role in a similar way.
Yeah, and I think what it does is it sort of brings civic buildings into the sort of a common use of the city. It's not sort of for special occasions. It's actually for anything that has the public congregate for things. And similarly, that a retail building actually has a dignity and a civic presence and a civic role to play.